The schedule in 2020 for Florida got a little bit tougher when they went to the All-SEC schedule because they wound up playing Texas A&M. Texas A&M was not originally on their schedule, and they actually went undefeated against the East. They beat everyone in the East, and they lost to Texas A&M, and of course losing to LSU late in the season, and then lost to Alabama in the SEC championship. So all three of their losses in the SEC were to SEC West teams. That means if they can do what they did last year again against the East, which is going to be tougher because I think the East in some ways is going to be tougher, especially with Georgia, it's going to come down to the teams in the West, and that will determine their success potentially in 2021. So let's take a look at the schedule, and you see here they play Florida Atlantic. That's where they will open up the season. What jumps out to me when I look at this schedule, nothing looks overly hard or super easy. It's not like they have a bunch of really tough games in a row. I think the schedule is kind of divided up pretty well, so we'll take a look at it. We'll go game by game, but let's first look at the games that they will play outside of the SEC East, the non-division games, because of course we know they play everyone in the East. So they will play, first of all, in the non-conference, Florida Atlantic on the road, which is interesting, against South Florida. They'll play Samford, and they'll play Florida State, not Stanford, Samford, and they'll play Florida State. All the teams that they play are pretty close in location. When you talk about three Florida schools and then Samford from Alabama, that's interesting, but that's who they'll play in the non-conference. They don't have a big non-conference game, of course, outside of that rivalry with Florida State. I'm going to be so happy to see the rivalries come back, the ones that we missed last year. Florida State, South Carolina Clemson, although that game hasn't been very competitive, but even like Kentucky and Louisville, Iowa State, it's just going to be fun to see those rivalries back this year. And Florida will have Florida State at home. They'll probably be favored in that game. So who do they play out of the West? Again, last year they wound up adding Texas A&M. That proved to be a tough matchup. They lost that game. They play LSU every year. That's their cross-division rival. They'll play LSU on the road this year. They got them at home last year. That's going to be a difficult game. I think LSU is going to be much improved from where they were last year. And then, of course, they'll play Alabama. They get them at home, but Alabama's probably still the best team in the West. More than likely, they will win the West. And I think LSU has a really good opportunity to be number 2 in the West this year. So that means Florida very possibly will play the top 2 teams out of the West in 2021. That is going to be very difficult. While the non-conference schedule is not too bad, the East is manageable. It's those 2 crossover games, the games against the West, Alabama and LSU, that are really going to make their schedule much more difficult. Now, we'll find out about LSU. Maybe they're not as good as I'm expecting them to be. They bring a lot of guys back, though. And then Alabama, I think everyone knows they're going to be a really good team. But at least Florida gets that game at home. So let's go game by game and kind of break down the schedule. They start again with Florida Atlantic on September 4th. Home game should be a fairly easy win. South Florida on the road on September 11th. Yes, it's on the road, but South Florida has not been good for many years now. That they were a very respectable group of 5 team, but the last few years it has just gone downhill for them. So that's not a game that I think Florida's gonna worry too much about. And it's good to have a couple of easier games to start the season. It's actually ideal because these games are not FCS games. They're games against teams that are somewhat competitive. So Florida's not going to be able to just sleepwalk through these games. They're going to have to prepare. They're going to have to get ready. But these games are easy enough to where it's going to allow them to grow and get better with a lot of new faces, especially on offense. So I think that really sets up well. They'll have a road test right there in week 2. So 2 games to really prepare them, where the games are not going to be super hard. They're not going to be games that they should lose, but they're not going to be games where they're going to play the starters for a half and pull all those guys out. They're going to have to play hard in these games, and I think that's going to be a good experience for them heading into SEC play, and that will begin on September 18th with Alabama. Like I said, the good news is they get this game at home. It'll be in the Swamp. We should have hopefully a full stadium, or at least more than we had last year, so there will be a home field advantage in this game. And Alabama's going to be a young team too. And I think if you want to play Alabama, you want to play them early before they get rolling. The problem for Florida, though, like I said, is they're going to have a lot of new faces as well. So they're not going to be rolling probably at this point either. And so that's going to be a very interesting matchup. It will obviously be a tough one for Florida, though, with Alabama being what they are and Florida losing all that they lost. But then after that, they'll play Tennessee on September 25th. Tennessee appears to be and going to be in pretty bad shape in 2021, so that shouldn't be too big of a challenge. Then they go into the month of October, where they will go on the road to play Kentucky. That is a tricky game right there. Kentucky is going to have a lot of guys back. They've proven now they've done it enough. We've seen Kentucky several years now in a row be able to put together quality teams. Now, they're not going to the college football playoff. They're not finishing the top 10, but they are putting out quality teams every single year. Kentucky should be a pretty good team this year, and that game on the road will be tough for Florida, but they follow that up with a game against Vanderbilt. So again, the schedule sets up really well for them. It's not a lot of really tough games in a row. The toughest two games in a row are going to be LSU and Georgia, which are two of their tougher games, but they get a bye week between those two games. So the schedule really, in at least the dates of the games, really sets up well for Florida. Now, again, the schedule is really tough because they play Alabama and LSU, but the dates of the games, I think, really could not be much better for Florida. So they'll have LSU on the road on October 16th. Like I said, it's going to be a tough place to play, Death Valley, but against, I think, an improved LSU team, an LSU team that beat Florida last year. So that one is going to be a challenge. And then they get the bye week before playing Georgia. Day before Halloween, October 30th. The bye week will help. They'll have some time to prepare. But again, Georgia is going to be really good this year, and this is going to be a tough matchup for Florida, especially coming off that LSU game. These two games right here, if they can win one of these two games, I think it's going to be a really good year for them. If they lose them both, could be a rough year. After that, they'll play South Carolina on the road on November 6th. South Carolina, a team that I don't expect to be great. New head coach. They weren't very good last year, so I like that one for Florida. And then they have Samford after that on November 13th, so you get an FCS team before playing a Missouri team that has really given Florida some fits since they've come into the SEC. The game is on the road against a Missouri team that was pretty good last year and should be even better this year. That is going to be a challenge. And again, when we talk about the back-to-backs, when we're talking about back-to-back weeks, Missouri and Florida State might be their toughest back-to-back. Again, LSU and Georgia, you got a bye week between there. But on the road at Missouri and then a rivalry game against Florida State, a Florida State team that we don't really know what to expect from. They have a ton of transfers coming in. They had a lot of guys that were out last year with injuries, and there's talent on this Florida State team. Will it come together? I don't know, but that could be a difficult game. So when you talk about Missouri on the road and then a big rivalry game against Florida State, those two games are going to be very important, I think, for the overall success of Florida's season in 2021. So when we talk about LSU and Georgia back-to-back, that's interesting. And then Missouri and Florida State back-to-back. And again, when I talk about LSU and Georgia, there is a bye week between there, so it's not back-to-back weeks, but back-to-back games. Those four games, those two back-to-backs are going to be, I think, what really determines the success of this Florida team in 2021.